You everybody for joining me on this beautiful Monday morning here in St. John's. I can't believe the temperatures and the sunshine. Of course, as you could probably tell, I've already been out and about now this morning doing some nursing work. So I'm here today to talk to you about the safety plans and some of the crucial elements that you want to consider for an early and safe reopening. And I'll explain to you what I mean by early as we're going through, but definitely safe is going to be on the forefront of everybody's minds. What I want to highlight is the fact that Catalyst Health Solutions, although only being in operation formally for 4 years, is headed by myself, and I've been an emergency department nurse. I like to call myself a recovering emergency department nurse for the last 15 years. So that's why I can come to you today with a little bit of an infection prevention and control expertise and explain to you a little bit about how you need to prepare to get reopened. It's time to get back to business, I think, don't you? So a little bit of our timeline to see exactly how it is that we've gotten to where we are today. Of course, March the 17th is the infamous date that COVID-19 officially made us all close down, and schools and businesses and government offices and everything sort of course, leading up to that, there'd been some sort of prodrome conversations, and a lot of organizations started pivoting to make sure that their employees could continue to perform their duties and work from home, especially some of the crucial essential services such as, Telelink was able to set things up at home and that kind of stuff. Then, of course, moving forward now, today is the day. We have 17 days up to this morning. We'll see what happens this afternoon. But we have a 17-day streak with no new positive cases. So what does that mean? That means that the Minister of Health and the Chief Medical Officer of Health for the province, Dr. Janice Fitzgerald, they have decided to start loosening some of the restrictions. Businesses are beginning to reopen. Of course, we're still in alert level 4 presently, but what that means is that we have 2 weeks to go until alert level 3. But as we've seen with some examples such as dog grooming businesses, they're starting to even loosen it now, so we can see how potentially some of the businesses that have been or were slated to be a delayed opening, perhaps there's been some work by the industries themselves to talk to government and the the chief medical officer in particular, and her office and her people, to say, but okay, so if we can make these pivots and changes and plans with our business, could we potentially open earlier? And that's what we've seen happen. So with no action in advance, there is 2 weeks until we get to alert level 3. But again, you can apply to reopen earlier if you have a safety plan ready to go. But if you don't, that's still 2 weeks for June the 8th, and there's more business categories that will reopen. And even if you don't apply to reopen early, there is a requirement for you to have a safety plan in place. And I'll get into more details about what that entails. But essentially, they will be going around and doing audits and spot checks to make sure that industries are following the rules. So you want to make sure that you do have that safety plan and that you can produce it for government. So what's included in a safety plan? The first thing is going to be a thorough risk assessment. Now, of course, that's going to be incredibly specific, but not even just across industries. You think about let's just talk about restaurants, for example. Restaurants are included in the alert level 3 for reopening, but they're going to be opening at a 50% capacity. And actually, I was speaking with Jason Piercy and the Out of the Fog team over the weekend, and one of the points that I made was, consider something like the Keg downtown and the operational space that they have versus Bagel Cafe and the operational space that they have. Those are two very different settings. So the risk assessment and the plan that you create in those two environments are going to be vastly different. Risk assessments are going to include things like you have to look at it from different perspectives. So not just from the employer's perspective and the business and what it is that you're actually producing. Is it food production? Is it manufacturing? But then also consider things from the point of view of the employee. What are the risks to the employee? And then, of course, what are the risks to the customers or the different patrons that would frequent your establishments? You want to make sure that you've got plans there to eliminate, and if you can't eliminate, because that isn't reasonable, like there is still risk, but how can you mitigate that to the best of your ability? That's what you're going to really be focusing in on, and I'll get into a little bit about what that looks like in just a moment. And of course, you want to have clear instructions for your employees and customers. That's going to include things like signage and things like, if you're going to, like Costco today has stated that they're going to be offering everybody a mask as they enter the building. I actually just heard on Open Line because a lady had asked about the fact that she physically is unable to wear a mask, and there's things like asthma that can be triggered by wearing a mask. And apparently Costco got back to them, because I just heard that second that they're going to be offering the masks to everybody walking in. They are encouraging everybody to wear them, but it's not mandatory. You won't be turned away. I'm interested to see how that will pan out, because that's an interesting conversation between the best interests of everybody's public health and an individual's right to choose. And of course, we are serving the publics, and customers are always right, sort of a thing. So, but if you have clear protocols and procedures written within your safety plan, then that might not be something that you even have to worry about. Well, what are the outcomes? Have that written in there. If somebody says, I absolutely refuse to wear this, where do you stand in terms of the responsibility to ensure that your employees are safe? Because as business owners, of course, you know that you're responsible to ensure safe and a safe workplace for your employees. So a risk assessment, again, like I say, they are going to be very specific depending on what it is that your industry is, what it is that you're doing. And again, from business to business, that is going to be very, that can have a lot of variation as well. As I mentioned, you want to make sure that the risks to your employees are front of mind. But of course, then there's always going to be a risk to customers as well if your employees aren't following the proper protocols. So those are the main sort of approaches that you're going to take to your risk assessment. But it includes everything from, your supply chain to how are you handling money to, do you have washrooms that are available to the public? And even if they're not available to the public, you still need to consider what it is that are, what kind of hazards could be presented to your employees using a common facility like that. So mitigating your COVID-19 exposure risk, the best way to approach it from an infection prevention and control standpoint are through 3 different standpoints in terms of administrative controls, engineering controls, and personal protection. So policies and procedures are part of what an administrative control would be. So those would be the actual guidelines. How is it that your employees are coming to work? How is it, are there forms that you want them to fill out, like a screening tool to make sure that they don't have any kind of symptomology, or and that's going to be a moving target because the symptom list is changing all the time. Are you going to suggest to your employees that they have a temperature check? Are you going to make it mandatory? One of the other things to consider when you're talking about what you can do from an administrative point of view is what is the amount of comfort and confidence that you want your employees to have in you, and not just your employees, your customers as well. Do you want to have a situation or a protocol where you have the nasopharyngeal swabs for COVID-19? How many negatives would you want to have for somebody before they can return to work after maybe being sick? Are you going to use it as a screening tool for every single time that an employee is coming to work? Say it's a mining situation or an offshore situation. Do you want to have a negative test confirmed before they go offshore or before they go into a remote camp? What are the cleaning schedules that you're going to put in place? And these are all just examples, guys. I could go on for days about what the different procedures are. So what are the cleaning schedules that you could implement? Are you making sure that you have the proper cleaning, disinfecting material? How are you going to make sure that they're actually being used? And how do you audit all of the strategies that you put into place? For situations, as I mentioned, like restaurants and things, or even just a retail store, what's the maximum occupancy that you can have in your building or in the business to make it the safest possible? Also, what about if you have a shared space? What if it's an office building and there's multiple businesses within the office building? Have you communicated with the business or the building owner or the renter to make sure that they have, elevator buttons and cleaning? Do they have procedures in place to make sure that the risk is not being transferred over to you specifically? Engineering controls are actual physical things. So that would be things like a plexiglass barrier between a cashier, or even my example I've been thinking of is the face shields and things, but that's more of a personal protective equipment. But what about plexiglass between a cashier and excuse me a second, I'm sorry about that. That's my mother, guys, I'm sorry. What about a plexiglass barrier between She's totally threw me off then. Between, say it's a close workspace. So what about from one employee to the next employee? Is it possible to put up a physical barrier between them? You know, like I say, in a fish plant situation or some sort of a mechanical situation. How are you going to be accepting payments? And do you have the physical key, like the keypads? So you have the tap option. Is that something? Entrance and exits is something I'm really fond of. So if you have a dedicated door for entrance or dedicated side of your business for entrance, and then a dedicated sign for a door for exiting your business, and then the appropriate signage to make sure that customers or employees know which direction to walk in and how to you know, maintain the physical distance between each other. So, and that includes signage on the ground. So you can have those mapped out 6 feet distances between people. And also, because signage is super key. And I'm very guilty of this myself, actually. When they started doing the physical barriers first and started putting the on the floor markings for 6 feet distance between everyone, how many times did I go down the wrong aisle and I'd look down and say, oh, and I noticed the arrow then, and I was already in the aisle. So really in your face type signage is very important to make sure that customers are following the protocols. What personal protection do you need to provide for your employees? Well, hand washing stations are pivotal. And of course, hand sanitizer was a hot commodity for a while, but I've had a bottle of that Newfoundland liquor company hand sanitizer up there. I don't know if you can see it on my shelf there. I just need to get it thickened up a little bit. And I actually have a pharmacy buddy who does compounding. They're Jason Trukin at the Medicine Shop in Paradise. He does he has the thickening agents that he's able to add to that to make it a gel. Otherwise it's a spray, and that's entirely appropriate too, but you would want to put it in a spray bottle, that sort of thing. What is the level of protection that you need based on how far apart your people are from each other? That is where you'll see the difference between masks and, you know, between a surgical mask or a homemade mask and an N95 requirement, gowns, shields, gloves, that sort of thing. Cleaning products do matter, as I mentioned just a little while ago. And of course, you know, the lunchroom and the smoking, how is it that you are going to be able to implement those things, because we can't expect people to stop smoking. But in the meantime, if you're using hand sanitizer, please be careful. It is flammable. Make sure your hands are dry before you light up a cigarette. I actually am a former smoker, and working in Emerge, I've had hand sanitizer on my hands, and I wish I could say I didn't have a close call once. Of course, with personal protection, it's not as easy as saying, here you go, now you figure it out. You want to make sure that your employees are educated on how to put it on and take it off appropriately. The official words for that are donning and doffing. Communication is obviously going to be the most important thing that you can have. So first of all, define what it is for your employees. If somebody is feeling unwell, what are the parameters to say, you're not coming to work today? Also, what's the difference between isolation and quarantine? What are the symptoms, and what's the current active list for when you need to call 811? How are you going to make sure that you keep privacy in place? You know, because we are talking about a health condition. So if your employee calls in sick, how much leeway do you have, or will you? How many liberties will you take with saying to your employees, this is when to not come to work? Just call us and say, I've got some symptoms, I'm just going to stay home today, and call 811, or are you going to have it in place where you ask them what the symptoms are? Because if it is a positive, if they call back and you know, they have the swab and it is a positive situation, what are you going to do in terms of contact tracing and that sort of thing? You want to make sure you have an open line of communication with the Department of Health as well. Of course, that's going to be initiated with your submission of the safety plan, but you want to have an ongoing conversation with the Department of Health so that they know that you're keeping up to date. Like I say, they are going to be coming around and doing audits, so making sure to check out that gov.nl.ca/COVID-19 page is something you're very much going to want to be on top of. And also with the changing of restrictions, because you don't want to lighten or impose more restrictions without your employees being the first people to know about it. So open conversations with them is going to be a very important piece of that. One of the things that I do suggest in terms of communication is to have a COVID team. So that can be one individual, it can be depending on the size of your organization, but what you want is somebody that's going to be incredibly up to date on the public health orders as they come out and the restrictions and the alert levels and what those mean for your business. You want to make sure that you have a medical professional as a resource, and that could just be within the guidelines that are on the government website, but somebody that does have some kind of background in infection prevention and control is certainly what I would suggest to have on hand. You want to have a response plan for what if you have a positive case. So let's say, for example, that one of your employees does become sick, or if you're going to do the routine swabbing, what if you have a positive case? How are you doing contact tracing for that person? How are you going to communicate that to the Department of Health and 811? How are you going to maintain is it in your best interest to maintain a log of who's coming and going, so that if somebody does come back with a positive case, that you could just refer back to your log and say, here's who they were in contact with between this period and this period. Ongoing communication with employees and the customers. If you have somebody, if you assign somebody or have a team of folks who are responsible for communicating with your employees, it will certainly ease a lot of headaches for you as an individual. And because you've got the business to run too, this is a component of what our new world looks like right now until there's a actual vaccine. And even for a little while after the vaccine, I think is going to be a lot of this stuff is still going to be in place. You want to also make sure that, say you do have a positive case, or you discover that a positive case or a risk person had come through your organization, get a list now. Get in touch with Service Clean, get in touch with, I don't know if Belfour does this sort of thing, I really don't know. Call around, who can you get to come in and do a deep clean of your organization if you have a positive case on house. If anybody has any suggestions on that, I would love to hear them, because I'm trying to compile a list myself. I know that there's a company in town called Zuno, which is like a fogging type of a system that lays a product around the space to decrease well, it actually kills everything. And it's a very organic sort of a thing. So that might be something to keep in mind as well. I would love to take questions and comments right now. I always find that excuse me, a lot of this information can be a bit repetitive. And of course, we're sick and tired of hearing wash your hands, cough into your elbows and sneezes into your elbows and wearing masks and what masks. And I mean, it's all that's on open line all day, every day. So what is it that I can answer for you specifically? Hopefully I can give you a bit of advice and guidance around what it is that you as an industry or as an individual business should be considering that wasn't in the presentation.
Awesome. Thank you.
And I wanted to show this picture. I wanted to show this picture right here because I haven't had a haircut in a very long time. I don't know what to do with my bangs anymore.
I know a number of people that were considering the dog groomer this morning when the dog groomers got opened up for their haircuts. Thank you for that, June. If anyone has questions, please put them in the chat or you can speak. I also want to let you know that this session is being recorded. So if anyone is wanted to talk, I just want to let you know your voice will be there. We are going to record this session and put it on YouTube. So you can watch it back. You can share it with anyone. So while we're waiting for some questions to come in, I had one myself, just because this is something that kind of happened here. For those of you who don't know, I work with the Board of Trade in their Connector and L program, and I'm in central Newfoundland, so I'm not in the St. John's office, but I am in an office building. And the week everything shut down, we had already transferred to working from home. But I got a call from the landlord of my office building and said that someone who was supposed to be quarantining went into the office building on day 13 of their 14-day quarantine, and it was found out by another tenant of the building. They weren't coming to look for me, but my landlord had to call and say, we're kind of closing the building down today to clean throughout. So is that something that you mentioned, having some organizations on hand, but is that actually something that needs to be reported? Is there a process around that if a customer comes in and they could be positive?
Well, my first response to that would be, how would you know that they were positive or that they could be positive? Mm-hmm. If they, volunteer the information of, say, for example, they say, yeah, I just got home from Florida, but I absolutely had to come in here today to get this XYZ. Then, yeah, I will. Am I kicked out?
Oh. Nope, you're still there. I just put it up so people could see you better.
Oh. Is it possible that, if somebody walks in and says that sort of thing to you, I would respectfully ask them to leave, and then I would actually go through the deep cleaning process. And I know that might sound like overkill, but it's either that or you got 14 days to wait until they either have a symptom or they don't. So I would absolutely have that list. And I'm seeing some of these coming up in the chat box there now. Belfour is certified, deep cleaning. Orkin has something. Eastern Safety Services has PPE. Yep, that's right. So I would definitely enlist and find out what their turnaround time is. Like if you call them today to say, I need you ASAP, what's their turnaround time? So make sure you've got a bunch of phone numbers on hand, so to speak. That's how I would answer that one. And that's a really great, I'm glad to hear that your landlord was proactive on that, and to make sure that he brought in the right people to take care of that situation for you.
Yeah. Seeing another question there now around temperature checks. Is there a privacy concern or a human rights concern with that?
It depends on how it's being done. So what we're doing with temperature checks is, because for example, I've got a couple of contracts now for providing temperature checks for some organizations. And what we're doing is it's the screening questions. We go through the questionnaire first. If they pass all the questions on that questionnaire, they still require a temperature check. And if the temperature is 37.8 or above, we just say, sorry, we can't let you fly today. Go on home. We're going to let your employer know, and your health and safety person or your occupational health and safety person will be following up with you. So it's not a matter of disclosing that they're sick. It just means that they've failed the screening. And so that's the way that you can maintain the privacy concern. In terms of human rights, like I say, it's that delicate balance of saying, it depends on the situation. How close are people to each other? So what we're screening for example, is in aircrafts. So if I let that person with a temperature get on the aircraft, what about the rights of all the other people to not be exposed to potentially getting unwell? So it could be argued either way. That's why there's human rights lawyers. But in the interest of the public health of everybody else, that's what we've been doing. So again, though, we don't get into, well, it looks like you've got a temperature. Like, what did you not tell us? Where were you? Where have you been? Blah, blah, blah. What are your symptoms? We don't get into any of that stuff. If they've passed the screening questionnaire and we check their temperature and it's normal, they're good to go. If it's not normal, we send them home and figure it out later. We don't, actually. We let the organization's individual health and safety people take over from there.
Okay. Seeing a couple questions here about what type of information you would include on a screening form. And also, is there a template, or does government have a template available?
Yeah, so there is actually. If you go to the 811 health line, those questions that for the self-assessment are verbatim what we use on our screening questionnaires, because that is the most accurate and up-to-date list of symptomology that Dr. Janice Fitzgerald has said would be a trigger for COVID-19. In order to get swabbed, you need to have 2 or more symptoms. For our purposes, what we're doing in terms of screening, given the delicate nature of if somebody were to have a positive test, we just go with 1 symptom. And that's more of a discussion between a medical director and the organization itself as a risk assessment in terms of what if somebody slipped through.
Okay. There is a question there too. This is more for the Board of Trade about members that have supplies. There is an area of our website that we've put out recently called go to St. John's Board of Trade /open for business. And there's actually a chart on there of members and actually some non-members that are in the St. John's or the Avalon metro area that supply different parts of PPE. So it could be hand sanitizer, it could be masks, but their name is there and their phone number. So St. John's Board of Trade /open for business, or if you just go to the main page, there's a button on the front and you can get some of that information there. Okay, any other questions? Keep them coming. I know June loves questions. She loves answering your questions. June, another one for me, I guess the last time we spoke, we were kind of still in the thick of it, maybe. And you were seeing some questions and things through people you're working with. What's the biggest concern you're seeing from people right now that we're not really in that, 20 cases a day situation that we were in before.
Yeah. So it's not even that the people I run into or my clients are having a lot of concerns. I mean, obviously everybody is afraid of being the next cause of a cluster. So in that regard, that's why I'm telling people to make sure that they have some sort of a plan wherein if they do have a positive case, how are you going to handle that? My biggest concern right now is more from my perspective, in that I feel that with the loosening of some of these restrictions, I'm afraid, and the weather's getting nice, I'm really anxious that folks are going to take the liberties and, give them an inch and they'll take a mile kind of a thing. Hopefully I can be proved wrong on that. But that's a wait and see kind of gig, right?
Mm-hmm. About the screening form again, can you ask on that if someone's gone outside their double bubble?
Well, I don't know if I think the screening questions would hit that really. Because if they've been in contact with somebody that's a known risk, for example, or if they're in contact with somebody that's a known positive case, that's all being asked on the screening question. Going outside the double bubble, I don't think really would answer any kind of specific questions. Like, for example, you talk about doing the nasopharyngeal swabs to test if somebody is positive or negative. What's the question that you're trying to answer is what you want to think about. If somebody comes back, because there is the risk of having false negatives and having false positives. So what are you going to do in either of those situations? That's the things that you want to consider if you're going to look at implementing a nasopharyngeal swab protocol. No, that's it.
Okay.
That's all I wanted to say on that.
That's good. Another question. Do you or anyone you know of have a template for that overall safety plan? So the full plan?
I don't think anybody has a template for the plan because outside of that, what I mentioned in terms of the administrative controls and engineering controls and that sort of thing, I don't know if a template is available. I do know that there's a ton of templates for the risk assessments. Based on that, you would find maybe that's how you can develop your safety plan outside of that.
Okay.
Because this is something that actually our organization does. Catalyst Health Solutions will come into your work site and do an assessment of the physical space, what it is, the work that you actually do, what are the resources that you currently have, and then we work on developing a plan with you.
Okay. Should we still try to maintain that 2 meter, 6 feet distance between people in spaces when we reopen?
Yes. And it says, yeah, oh my goodness, yes, absolutely. So, and that's sort of the thing. Even though some of the restrictions are being loosened, it doesn't mean that the virus is gone. It doesn't mean that the risk is gone. So that all of those hand washing, cough into your elbow, stay home if you're sick, only go places that you need to go, those are all still in effect until at least June the 8th. And the actual virus prevention stuff, the coughing into your arm, the stay home if you're sick, keep 2 meters apart, all of those are still very much in place.
Okay. The risk assessment templates that you mentioned, are they something that's specific to COVID, or is that a general assessment that you could have for any time of year?
I do it for infection control purposes. So, for example, the flu season is another good reason to do a risk assessment in terms of infection transmission. And that's what my organization in particular does. There are other companies that do, like Dallas Mercer does risk assessment, risk mitigation in terms of, injury and lost time. I do it from the actual health and wellness perspective. And that's why COVID-19 is something that I can be a little bit more specific to potentially.
Okay, yeah, and we actually have Dallas coming up in a few weeks, so if you're
Perfect.
interested in getting some of that, she's coming up, I believe, on the 10th of June. And someone asked if you could share that template for infection control, or do you know where they could get it?
I tell you what, the best place to go is the best one I found was on the public health website for Ontario. They've got a really good one. If you just Google infection control risk assessment, the first one that comes up is the Ontario one, and it's excellent.
Okay, good. People keep putting in the questions. We love to have the questions. Another one for me, now that you've been working with people on their reopening plans and working with some of the corporations, has anyone started talking to you about what if God forbid another cluster happens and we have to go back to level 4 or level 5? Is that something that's on a lot of people's minds?
It is. And, you really want to think about, you want to make this plan airtight, because if there is a positive case, what does that, or if, let's say, for example, one of your employees does become sick, what does that mean in terms of potentially having to shut back down for you guys? Or conversely, what would it mean if you lost 50% of your staff because they all had to self-isolate for 14 days? Not that there's an active illness, but if they all had an exposure, for example. So those are the sorts of things that you want to consider, because really for some of the smaller or low profit margin type businesses, what is that risk worth it financially? Is it financially responsible for you to consider it until we get to at least alert level 2, for example?